Good evening, Erev Tov. So let's talk this evening about, we read in the Parsha this week, we read about Asseret Hadibrot, Ma'amad Har Sinai, what's often translated, probably somewhat a mistranslation, but translated as the 10 Commandments, right? Asseret Hadibrot, which is a very significant event which occurred at Ma'amad Har Sinai, very significant section in the Torah. Of course, every section in the Torah is significant. Right? We know that. We know that if you have a Sefer Torah that has even one letter that's missing, the whole thing is pasul. Every letter counts, every verse counts. But there's something, and the very interesting halachic discussion comes out about the way that we should behave when reading the Asseret Hadibrot. So there's a widespread minhag, very widespread custom to stand for when we read the Asseret Hadibrot on Shabbat morning. So the truth is, this is not the only place where it's singled out. The Shulchan Aruch, in the very first siman, says, last week we spoke about Parashat Haman. The Shulchan Aruch says there are a number of parashiot in the Torah that it's a good idea to read them every day. One of them, he says the Akedah, he says Parashat Haman, he says the Asseret Hadibrot. Doesn't say you should sit and read the entire Torah every day, you probably never finish. But he says Asseret Hadibrot is one of those. So there is a certain significance to it. The Ramah over there says that's only talking about an individual. That's not together in the tzibur, reason we'll see in a moment. Mishnah Berurah adds, he says even an individual who's reading it, it means to read these psukim afterwards, not as part of the tefillah, right? And why is it significant? What is the extra significance that's attached to it? So maybe different explanations given in the Rishonim. One of them, the Rishonim and the Achronim, the Gemara in Shabbat says that Ktav shebaluchot nikra bifnim v'nikra mibachutz. That when you had the luchot, when they were given, which had the dibrot on them, they could be read both ways. Whichever way you would look at it, you'd be able to read it the correct way. But yeah,
front side and back side.
Yeah, yeah. But what's interesting is that the language the Gemara uses, it says nikra bifnim u'mibachutz, from inside and from outside. So Ktav Kabbalah says, it's very interesting perush. He says, what does it mean? Nikra bifnim v'nikra bachutz. He says what it means is essentially what we call maybe nigle and nista. He says there were the things which were obvious, the things which were from outside, and the things when you, on those original luchot, you could see within them, you could delve inside. You had all the klalim and all the yesodot, and all of Torah was contained. All of Torah, the secrets of everything, was contained within those Asseret Hadibrot. He says once the first luchot were broken, so then we lost it. We don't know how to access it anymore. But the Mepharshim talk about how in some ways these Asseret Hadibrot may be the roots for other things, maybe the roots of different, everything else which is contained in the Torah. In any event, so that is why the Shulchan Aruch says that it's a good idea to read it every day. And that is why maybe we have the custom of standing during the reading. However, not everybody accepted this custom. Not everybody was so happy about it. Chief amongst them, the Rambam. The Rambam has a tshuva. This is not in the Mishnah Torah, but this is in a shut, one of the Rambam's halachic responses. And he's asked about this custom of standing during a Asseret Hadibrot. Now, before that, the Gemara in Brachot tells us that Chazal thought about instituting that we have to say Asseret Hadibrot every day, that we have to say it together with Kriyat Shema. The Gemara in Brachot talks about a few interesting suggestions. It says Chazal thought about having Parshat Balak as part of Kriyat Shema as well. Why Parshat Balak? I have to leave that. We'll talk about that another time. But Asseret Hadibrot, we can more readily understand why that would be something we would have to read every day, something we'd have to include as part of Kriyat Shema. And says the Gemara that they said no, mipnei taromet haminim, because of the minim, because of the apikosim, because of people who wouldn't understand, people who would make a mistake, people would think, oh, you're reading the Asseret Hadibrot every day. Why? Because that's the part of the Torah that matters. That's the part which came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the part which is true. That's right. Everything else doesn't matter. Chas v'shalom. Everything else doesn't matter. It's only that part, only the Asseret Hadibrot. And therefore, because of Taromet Aminim, says the Gemara, we don't read the Asseret Hadibrot each day. That's why the Shulchan Aruch says, the Ramah says, you want to say it, you can say it as a yachid, not as a tzibur. You can say it after tefillah, not during tefillah, etc. So the Rambam says in his tshuva, he says, if we say in the Gemara that because of this Taromet Aminim, we can't say Asseret Hadibrot each day. We can't give it extra significance. We can't give the impression that it's more important than everything else. So same thing. When you're reading it from the Torah, when you're reading Parshat Yitro and Parshat Vayetchanan, you're going to get to this section. And you say the rest of the time, there's a machloket in halakha, whether one has to stand up for Kriyat Torah in general. Generally speaking, in Paskan, that it's not required. Some people have the chumrah, some people have a midat chasidut to stand up all the time during Kriyat Torah. But assuming that you're not doing that, if we're going to stand up for this section, we're saying the rest of the time we sit down. Now we stand up. Why? This is more important. This is the part which is true. The rest is not. Says the Rambam, and he's very, very vehement, very, very vociferous in his opposition to this idea of standing for the Asseret Hadibrot. He says, he writes in his Shuvah, you'll say to me that the Bavlim stand up, that already at this time, the custom was quite widespread. In Bavel, they had the custom to stand up. So says the Rambam, so would you tell me, if you have a group of people that some of them are sick and some of them are healthy, that everybody has to be the same? So all the healthy people should now get sick so they can be the same as the other people. He says, no, that's ridiculous. You wouldn't say that. You have to go to the sick people and you have to try and heal them. He says, in the same way, the minhag is wrong. The custom is wrong, says the Rambam, and we have to fix it. You should not go and you should not stand up. So says the Rambam in his truth. In modern day poskim, the one who follows the Rambam, maybe unsurprisingly, is Rav Ovadia Yosef. Rav Ovadia has a couple of tshuvot in Yechavedat, and he says, just like the Rambam says, one is not allowed to stand for this. One should not stand. He says, if you come to a place where they have a minhag to stand, he says, if let's say a Rav was appointed to a community, and he finds that their minhag, even though generally speaking we keep minhagim, it's very important, we don't cancel minhagim. He says that Rav should go, and he should, obviously he says he should do it in a polite way, and he should do it respectfully, etc. But he says he should cancel that minhag. They should not stand. So Paskins Rav Ovadia. Okay, he says, what happens if a person? Don't worry, we're not finished. There are other Ashkenazi poskim as well. He says, what if a person comes to a place where he is not the Rav, but everybody is standing, and he knows, right, because he holds like the Rambam that he should not be standing. Should he then sit? What about Lotit Goredu, right? Should he be sitting during the Kriyat Torah when everyone else is standing? So he says, it may give off he says, first of all, yes, he says that's what he should do. But it may give off the impression now everybody's standing and now you're sitting, right? We're trying to avoid the problem of saying that this looks more important. You're now making it look like it's less important. So he says what you should do. He says the person there can stand up a few psukim before, stand up for a longer portion, so you're not just standing up for the Asseret Hadibrot, and that's the way. That is Rav Ovadia following the Rambam. Now, as I said, there are many poskim. Probably again the most of the Ashkenazi poskim say not like the Rambam, say that one should stand, and this is the minhag, and one should follow that. Why is that? How do we justify the minhag if the Gemara said Torah mitaminim and the Rambam said no? All right. So there are a number of ways and a number of explanations given. First of all, you go back and look at what the Gemara was talking about, was adding in the section as part of your tefillah. Right? So if you're adding it in as part of the tefillah, that is one way of giving it extra significance. Whereas when you're just reading from the Kriyat Torah, that is not the same. The Chidah actually points out, he says, it's not, by tefillah, there's only a certain section that you're saying, and everything else you're not saying. Right? By Kriyat Torah, we read everything. We go through the whole cycle. He says, even on the Shabbat, when you read the Asseret Hadibrot, you're not just reading Asseret Hadibrot, you're reading the whole of Parshat Yitro. You're reading the whole of Parshat Vayetchanan. So you're not giving extra importance in that way. We know the rest is important and the rest is true because you're reading everything else as well. And he says the Chidah, and therefore he says that it would be permitted. Moshe Feinstein discusses as well, and he says sort of a similar answer with a slightly different twist. He says we stand up for other sections of the Torah. We stand up, we get to the end of a Chumash, Chazak Chazak V'nit Chazek. We stand up for Shirat Hayam, Parshat B'Shalach. Right, so he says if we are standing up for other sections, we're showing that it's not just this section that matters. All of it. Sometimes we have a minhag to stand, sometimes we sit, but that's allowed. Rav Sternbuch takes essentially the heter, the leniency which Rav Ovadia gave b'diavad, and he says lekatchila. He says again, the point is, if you're worried about the fact that standing up for this section gives it extra importance, so you stand up for more than just this section, right? No one's going to think that the psukim before are, have the same status as the Asseret Hadibrot, and therefore he says that is okay, and he says that one can do that. He also says, he has a line in the Tshuva, which is very interesting. He says, in our days, we're not worried about the Torah Metaminim. Maybe what he means to say is that, again, if the situation is such, and if there's people are going to think that this section of Torah is more important than others, but if people know there's not a philosophy going around that it's only the Asseret Hadibrot, etc., then maybe that's allowed. But he does say, in order to be Yotzei Kol Hadeot, he says stand up not just for that section, but a little bit before as well. Tzitz Eliezer, another one of the contemporary poskim, he has a tshuva about this, and he says two things very interesting. He says, number one, he says, how do we justify the minhag according to the Rambam? Maybe we can't justify according to the Rambam, but the Rambam, as important as he was one of the Rishonim, and there are other Rishonim. And you see the fact that this minhag was accepted and that it was widespread, that others felt this was not a concern, and therefore we pass in that way, not like the opinion of the Rambam. That's one point. But another point he makes, which is very interesting, he says, where does the Rambam say this? That you can't stand up for the Asseret Hadibrot, go against the minhag. He does not write this in the Mishneh Torah. He writes this in one of his tshuvot. Now the Mishneh Torah, which we've had all along, he says this tshuva, for however many years or however many centuries it was lost, and then it was found in a gnizah somewhere. And when it came out, right, there was already, the Masorah had been established, the minhag had already been established, that this is something that we say. And therefore, he says, even if it might be that, objectively the Rambam was correct, to what extent when we already have the minhag that has been established and you didn't have access to that particular tshuva, to that particular piece, does it come in and can we use it now to change the halacha, to go against the minhag that there is? He quotes a source from the Chazon Ish who discusses this matter as well. But based on that and other reasons, Tzitz Eliezer says we can stand and it's fine to stand, and that is the minhag. So many different poskim for various reasons say that is the minhag. It's okay to keep, and one should continue to do that, to stand through. Just one other interesting point regarding the Asseret Hadibrot. So we know that the section is written twice in the Torah. We have it in Parashat Yitro and again in Parashat Vayetchanan. And there are differences between what's written in Parashat Yitro and what's written in Vayetchanan. So maybe one of the most famous ones, we say every Friday night, right? Exactly. Shamor v'zachor v'dibor echad. Right? So in one place it says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, in one place it says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. Which one of those, which version was written on the original Luchot? Right? Or which was it, the version in Yitro or the version in Vayetchanan? So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Emet Yaakov, is a very interesting idea. He says it was only written one way. It's the same as sometimes we have a Kriya Nektiv. We have a Kriya Nektiv in the Chumash. There's one way a word is read and one way that it is written. Sometimes you have difference. He says, so you had Kriya Nektiv of the Luchot Rishonot and the Luchot Shniot. Which one was written regarding Shabbat? Did it say Zachor or did it say Shamor? So says Rav Yaakov, we have maybe a bit of a proof that what was written was Shamor. Why? Because what we say on Shabbat, every Shabbat morning in Shachrit, say Yismach Moshe Panat Chalkol, all right? That's what we say, that Moshe brought down the Luchot, and it says on him Shmirat Shabbat. Rav Yaakov, maybe it's a little bit of a proof. Shmirat Shabbat and not Schirat Shabbat. But there it says Shamor, so the Kri was Shamor, or the Ktiv was Shamor, and the Kri was Zach. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Omer, Tzakadosh Baruch Hu, Zakot Yisrael, Lefichach Ba'alem Tzom Mitzvot, Shneimad Rech B'Tzman Tzidko, Yagdil